Far too many people lose their peace the moment someone decides to provoke them, and that is often exactly what the other person intended. The words themselves are rarely the real weapon. The real weapon is the reaction they provoke. A sarcastic remark, a dismissive smile, or a carefully aimed insult can turn an ordinary moment into an emotional battle before reason has time to speak. Most conflicts are not won by the person with the strongest argument. They are won by the person who succeeds in pulling someone else out of their composure. The moment another person controls your emotions, they have already gained more influence over you than they deserve. The Stoics understood this truth long before the modern world gave it new names. They knew that real strength is not found in controlling other people, but in refusing to let other people control you. A calm mind is difficult to manipulate because it does not surrender itself to every passing emotion. It remains anchored in judgment instead of impulse. That quiet mastery is not reserved for extraordinary people. It is a discipline developed through countless ordinary moments, when the choice between reaction and restraint quietly shapes the kind of person you become. The remarkable thing is that this kind of strength is almost invisible. It does not seek attention or announce itself through louder words. It appears in the brief pause before you respond, in the decision to protect your peace instead of your pride, and in the ability to walk away from conflicts that were never worth carrying. Over time, those quiet choices become more than habits. They become character, and once that happens, very few people possess the power to disturb your inner world. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. Perhaps they questioned your intelligence, mocked your choices, or spoke with just enough disrespect to make your emotions rise before your mind had time to catch up. In moments like these, most reactions feel automatic, as though another person has pressed a hidden button inside you. The mind is designed to notice threats before it has time to evaluate them. A careless sentence can seem far more important than it truly is because it touches pride, fear, or insecurity. Before reason has time to speak, emotion has already made its case. Many conflicts begin with moments that could have ended with a single calm breath instead of an immediate reply. Provocation succeeds because it asks for speed. It invites you to react before you have the chance to choose. The faster your response, the easier it becomes for another person to shape the direction of the conversation. What feels like defending your dignity often becomes surrendering your peace, because your attention shifts away from your own values and toward proving something to someone else. At that point, your emotional state depends less on your own judgment than on another person's behavior. The exchange is invisible, but its effects last far longer than the moment itself. You leave the conversation, yet your mind keeps replaying every word, every expression, and every response you wish you had given. The Stoics observed that very little can disturb a disciplined mind without first receiving permission from within. They never suggested pretending that hurtful words do not sting. Instead, they encouraged a deeper awareness. The first emotion may appear on its own, but the story you continue telling yourself afterward is where lasting suffering begins. One careless comment becomes an evening of arguments inside your own mind. A brief disagreement turns into hours of imagined conversations. The moment itself lasted only seconds. The mind keeps it alive for hours because it quietly believes that replaying it will somehow restore a sense of control. This habit is more common than most people realize. The mind often mistakes repeated thinking for meaningful progress. It assumes that replaying an insult will eventually produce the perfect response or erase the discomfort altogether. Yet the opposite usually happens. Every repetition strengthens the emotional memory instead of dissolving it. The words grow heavier because they are carried far beyond the moment in which they were spoken. Gradually, another person's opinion begins occupying space that should belong to your own thoughts. Space that could have been used for clearer judgment, wiser decisions, or simply enjoying the life unfolding in front of you. Notice how easily attention becomes attached to whatever challenges the ego. Praise feels pleasant, but criticism often lingers because it seems to demand an answer. The desire to explain yourself can become almost irresistible. Still, not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Some people are searching for clarity, while others are searching for a reaction. Marcus Aurelius expressed this clearly when he wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Learning the difference protects far more than your mood. It protects your ability to remain guided by principles instead of impulses. That quiet distinction changes every difficult interaction because it reminds you that self-respect does not require constant self-defense. Real strength appears where most people never think to look. It lives in the brief pause before words leave your mouth. That pause is not weakness. It is not hesitation or fear. It is evidence that your judgment remains in command even while emotion asks to take control. A calm response is often built during a silent moment that nobody else notices. While another person expects immediate resistance, you give yourself enough time to separate facts from feelings. Suddenly the situation changes. The insult loses much of its force because you no longer experience it as an emergency demanding instant action. That single pause becomes the place where freedom quietly begins. If this way of thinking speaks to you, consider subscribing. By doing so, you are choosing to invest in something deeper than information. You are choosing a practice of reflection, self-mastery, and steady growth. Each conversation is another opportunity to strengthen your mind, deepen your character, and apply the timeless principles of Stoicism where they matter most, in everyday life. Healthy boundaries still matter, and difficult conversations sometimes need honest responses. The difference lies in the source of those responses. They should come from deliberate judgment rather than wounded pride. When your actions are chosen instead of triggered, they reflect your character instead of someone else's influence. That shift may seem subtle, yet it changes everything. You stop reacting because you were pushed, and you start responding because it aligns with the kind of person you are trying to become. Once you begin recognizing this invisible exchange, another thought naturally emerges. Every provocation presents two opportunities at the same time. One invites you to surrender your inner balance for the temporary satisfaction of being right. The other invites you to preserve something far more valuable than victory in a single conversation. The choice is rarely easy, but it becomes clearer with practice. If reacting so quickly gives away your power, then perhaps real strength has never been about overpowering another person. Perhaps it has always been about remaining steady enough that nobody else can quietly take command of your mind. That realization does not arrive all at once. It grows through ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. Each time you resist the urge to answer immediately, you strengthen a habit that slowly reshapes your character. Each calm decision becomes evidence that your peace is no longer controlled by passing emotions. Over weeks and months, people may notice your composure, but the greater change happens within. You begin trusting yourself more than your impulses. That quiet confidence cannot be borrowed from praise or taken away by criticism, because it has been built through repeated choices instead of temporary feelings. Real strength rarely announces itself through louder words or sharper arguments. Instead, it appears in the quiet space between what happens to you and how you decide to respond. Most people believe self-control is about suppressing emotions, but Stoicism points to something much deeper. It is about refusing to let passing emotions become permanent decisions. Every insult presents two opportunities. One is to react immediately and continue the conflict. The other is to pause long enough to remember that another person's behavior belongs to them, while your character belongs to you. As Epictetus wisely said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That small pause may seem insignificant, yet it quietly separates those who are ruled by circumstances from those who govern themselves. At first, that pause feels almost unnatural because the mind has been trained to believe that immediate reactions are signs of confidence. Many people fear that remaining calm will make them appear weak, passive, or unable to defend themselves. Yet calmness is not surrender. It is the refusal to let another person's emotions become the architect of your behavior. There is a quiet confidence in choosing your next words instead of allowing your first feelings to choose them for you. The difference is invisible in a single moment, but over time it shapes an entirely different character. The Stoics understood that emotions are not enemies to be destroyed. They are signals asking for attention, not commands demanding obedience. Anger can reveal that a boundary has been crossed. Disappointment can reveal an expectation that deserves examination. Hurt can reveal an attachment that has become stronger than wisdom. None of these feelings are problems by themselves. The problem begins when they become the only voice you listen to. A disciplined mind notices emotion without handing it complete authority, creating enough distance to decide whether the feeling deserves action or simply understanding. This is why genuine self-control feels different from suppression. Suppression pushes emotions into the background while they continue influencing thoughts in quieter ways. Discipline acknowledges them without becoming trapped inside them. Think of the difference between holding a ball underwater and allowing it to float beside you. One approach demands constant effort because you are fighting against reality. The other accepts reality while refusing to be controlled by it. Peace grows more easily when you stop struggling against every feeling and begin observing it with honesty. As this habit develops, something unexpected happens. The people who once seemed overwhelmingly frustrating begin appearing more understandable. Their words lose some of their power because you begin noticing the patterns beneath them. Many insults are repeated by people carrying old disappointments. Many harsh judgments come from insecurity rather than certainty. Many attempts to provoke are really attempts to escape personal discomfort by transferring it elsewhere. Seeing this does not excuse harmful behavior, but it changes your relationship with it. Compassion quietly replaces resentment without removing healthy boundaries. That change also transforms the way you see yourself. Instead of measuring strength by your ability to win arguments, you begin measuring it by your ability to remain guided by your principles. Success is no longer determined by whether another person admits you were right. It is determined by whether you leave the interaction with your integrity intact. This standard is far more stable because it depends on choices you can actually control. External approval becomes less important when inner consistency becomes the greater goal. There will still be moments when patience feels difficult. Certain words will still touch old wounds. Certain situations will still awaken familiar frustrations. Growth does not erase human emotion. It changes the relationship you have with it. Every pause becomes another opportunity to practice rather than another test to fear. Slowly, the distance between feeling and reaction grows wider, giving wisdom more room to speak before impulse takes over. Eventually, remaining calm stops feeling like a strategy and starts becoming part of your nature. People may notice that you are harder to provoke, but the deeper victory remains invisible. Your mind becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in deliberate choice. That quiet stability influences every relationship, every conversation, and every challenge that follows. The pause that once seemed so small becomes the place where freedom quietly begins, and from that freedom comes a new way of seeing both yourself and everyone around you. From that point forward, difficult people still exist, but they no longer define the quality of your day. Their actions remain their responsibility. Your response remains yours. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. That simple distinction protects energy that would otherwise be wasted on endless arguments and silent grudges. It reminds you that lasting peace is built through countless ordinary choices, each one reinforcing the quiet discipline that eventually becomes an unshakable way of living with greater clarity, patience, and resilience every day. You begin noticing that many provocations are not really about you at all. People often speak from their own frustration, insecurity, disappointment, or need for control, projecting struggles they have never resolved onto whoever happens to be standing in front of them. This realization does not excuse harmful behavior, but it changes how you interpret it. Instead of viewing every insult as proof that something is wrong with you, you begin seeing it as evidence that another person is struggling with something within themselves. Suddenly, the emotional weight of their words becomes much lighter. The attack loses much of its force because you no longer mistake another person's emotional state for an accurate reflection of your own worth. This shift in perspective is subtle, yet it changes almost everything. The same sentence that once stayed in your mind for hours begins losing its ability to disturb you because you stop treating it as a verdict about your identity. Not every harsh opinion deserves to become part of your self-image. Not every criticism carries wisdom simply because it was spoken with confidence. Many people speak from the limits of their own understanding, seeing the world through experiences that have shaped their fears, expectations, and assumptions. Their words reveal far more about the lens through which they see life than they reveal about the person standing before them. The Stoics understood that every individual lives according to what appears true to them in that particular moment. Someone driven by anger believes anger is justified. Someone ruled by envy believes another person's success is somehow unfair. Someone consumed by insecurity often searches for flaws in others because acknowledging their own feels unbearable. When viewed from this angle, certain behaviors begin making more sense, even if they remain unacceptable. Understanding the source of an action does not require approving of it. It simply prevents you from carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to begin with. Think about how often people bring yesterday's disappointments into today's conversations. A difficult morning becomes unnecessary impatience toward a coworker. Old family wounds become suspicion in healthy relationships. Personal failure becomes criticism of someone else's ambition. Most individuals rarely pause long enough to separate what belongs to the present from what they have been carrying for years. As a result, they unconsciously hand pieces of their unresolved struggles to everyone around them. Those who fail to recognize this pattern often accept those burdens as if they were personally responsible for creating them. Of course, knowing this does not instantly erase emotional reactions. Certain words still sting because they touch experiences you have not fully healed. Certain criticisms still linger because they awaken doubts that already existed beneath the surface. The goal is not to become emotionally untouched by everything. Such a person does not exist. The goal is to become increasingly aware of why particular comments affect you so deeply. Every strong reaction points towards something worth understanding, not because the other person is necessarily right, but because your response reveals something about your own inner landscape. This also changes how compassion appears in everyday life. Compassion is often mistaken for weakness, but it requires tremendous inner stability. Seeing another person's frustration without absorbing it is not passive. It is disciplined. You begin recognizing that people carrying the greatest inner conflict often create the greatest outer conflict. Those who are genuinely at peace rarely feel the need to diminish others in order to feel significant themselves. Their confidence does not depend on winning emotional battles because they are no longer fighting invisible wars within themselves. Gradually, your attention shifts away from controlling how others behave and toward refining how you interpret what happens around you. That is one of the most liberating changes a person can experience. You stop expecting everyone to become reasonable before you can remain peaceful. You stop believing that every misunderstanding must be corrected before you can move forward. Instead, you discover that your peace becomes stronger each time you refuse to allow another person's unresolved struggles to become your own emotional responsibility. Yet insight alone is not always enough. You may understand exactly why someone acted the way they did and still feel the impulse to defend yourself. Knowledge creates awareness, but awareness must eventually become action. The mind may recognize the truth long before the emotions fully accept it. That is why wisdom is never measured by what you know alone. It is measured by what you consistently practice when life places that knowledge under pressure. Even after recognizing what is happening, the urge to defend yourself can still appear with surprising intensity. The mind naturally wants fairness, validation, and the satisfaction of proving someone wrong. That desire is deeply human because most people grow up believing that being misunderstood is something that must always be corrected. A false accusation feels like a threat. An unfair judgment feels like an attack on your identity. Without realizing it, you begin treating every disagreement as though your worth depends on changing another person's opinion. Yet the harder you chase that approval, the further it often moves away, leaving you exhausted instead of understood. This is where Stoic discipline becomes practical rather than theoretical. Instead of asking how to win the argument, you begin asking whether the argument deserves your attention at all. That single shift in perspective transforms the purpose of every difficult conversation. Your goal is no longer to leave feeling victorious. Your goal is to leave with your judgment, composure, and peace still intact. Those are achievements another person's approval can never provide. Once you understand that, many situations that once felt urgent begin appearing surprisingly small. The mind often confuses silence with surrender because it has been conditioned to believe that every unanswered criticism becomes an accepted truth. Yet reality rarely works that way. People who know your character will not suddenly abandon their understanding of you because of one accusation. Those determined to misunderstand you will rarely change their minds because of one perfect explanation. In both cases, endless defense accomplishes very little. The need to answer everything usually satisfies the ego more than it serves wisdom. Letting go of that need creates room for something much more valuable than being right. There is also another cost hidden beneath constant self-defense. Every unnecessary argument consumes attention that could have been invested elsewhere. While your mind replays conversations, life quietly continues moving forward. Opportunities appear and disappear. Relationships deserving of care wait patiently, while emotional energy remains trapped inside conflicts that produce no lasting benefit. One difficult interaction can influence an entire day if you continue carrying it from one moment to the next. Eventually you realize that some people have occupied your thoughts far longer than they ever occupied your actual life. The Stoics encouraged examining the true price of every emotional investment. Before responding, they would ask whether the outcome justified the effort required. That habit remains just as valuable now as it was centuries ago. Every conversation asks for something in return. Sometimes it asks for patience, sometimes it asks for honesty, other times it quietly demands your peace. The wise person learns to recognize the difference before paying a price that cannot easily be recovered. Time, attention, and inner calm are limited resources. Spending them wisely becomes an expression of self-respect rather than avoidance. Something interesting happens when you stop feeling responsible for correcting every misunderstanding. The emotional pressure begins fading almost immediately. Instead of carrying the impossible task of controlling another person's thoughts, you return your attention to the one place where meaningful influence has always existed: your own choices. There is remarkable freedom in accepting that another person's opinion belongs to them just as your character belongs to you. They may judge you unfairly, criticize you carelessly, or refuse to see your intentions clearly. None of those actions have the power to redefine who you are unless you quietly accept their judgment as your own. This perspective also changes the way you listen. Instead of hearing every criticism as a personal attack, you become more capable of separating useful observations from emotional noise. Occasionally, someone points out a genuine weakness worth improving. Other times, they simply reveal their own frustrations through their words. Remaining calm allows you to recognize the difference without becoming defensive too quickly. Ironically, people who are less eager to defend themselves often become more open to genuine growth because they are no longer confusing every uncomfortable comment with a threat to their identity. There will always be individuals who mistake calmness for weakness. Some may even increase their efforts when they realize they cannot provoke the reaction they expected. Yet their persistence often reveals the very thing they hope to hide. People searching desperately for conflict usually depend upon conflict for their sense of significance. They need resistance because resistance gives their emotions somewhere to settle. Refusing to provide that emotional reward quietly changes the entire interaction. The conflict begins losing momentum because one side no longer continues feeding it with unnecessary energy. Gradually, conversations stop becoming contests that must be won. They become opportunities to practice discernment, patience, and deliberate choice. You begin speaking because your words serve a purpose rather than because your emotions demand release. Sometimes that purpose is honesty. Sometimes it is setting a clear boundary. Sometimes it is choosing silence because silence communicates more strength than another explanation ever could. As Epictetus observed, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. The remarkable thing is that people cannot easily manipulate someone who no longer feels obligated to prove their worth. That confidence grows quietly through repeated practice until protecting your peace becomes more important than protecting your pride, and that is the moment difficult conversations begin losing their power over you. Once you stop measuring success by your ability to defeat every criticism, a different kind of confidence begins to emerge. It is quieter than the confidence built on applause, and far more stable than the confidence that depends upon winning arguments. For a long time, it may feel unfamiliar because it does not ask for constant proof. It does not require every misunderstanding to be corrected or every accusation to be answered. Instead, it grows from a simple realization that your character is shaped by your choices, not by another person's opinion of them. The more deeply this truth settles into your mind, the less emotional pressure you feel whenever someone questions your worth. You begin noticing that calmness often communicates far more strength than endless explanations ever could. A brief, composed response carries a quiet certainty that emotional arguments cannot imitate, because it reveals that your peace no longer depends on changing another person's opinion. There is something deeply unsettling about meeting hostility with genuine composure. People expecting resistance often lose their sense of direction when they are met with patience instead. They prepared themselves for conflict, yet they encounter someone who refuses to let the conversation become a contest of emotions. That refusal is not an attempt to appear superior. It is simply the result of no longer believing that every challenge deserves the same amount of attention. Many people spend years trying to protect an image rather than developing a character. They carefully manage how they appear, how they are perceived, and how quickly others approve of them. While there is nothing wrong with wanting to be understood, there is a danger in allowing that desire to become the foundation of your identity. The moment your value depends upon another person's agreement, your emotional stability becomes fragile. Every compliment lifts you higher than it should, and every criticism pulls you lower than it deserves. The Stoics warned against placing your peace in things that can be taken away by circumstances beyond your control, and few things change more quickly than public opinion. This does not mean becoming indifferent to feedback or pretending that every criticism is meaningless. Wisdom listens carefully before deciding what deserves acceptance. Some observations reveal blind spots you genuinely need to address. Others reflect misunderstandings that require clarification. Still others are nothing more than passing judgments shaped by another person's frustrations or expectations. The challenge is learning to distinguish one from the other without allowing emotion to make that decision for you. Calmness creates the space where discernment becomes possible. Without that pause, everything feels equally urgent, and every opinion seems equally important. One of the most liberating moments in personal growth arrives when you realize that not every voice deserves equal influence over your thinking. People speak from different levels of experience, different values, and different intentions. Some want to encourage growth, others simply want to express their own dissatisfaction. If you accept every opinion with the same seriousness, your direction will constantly change depending on who spoke most recently. A disciplined mind learns to weigh advice rather than absorb it automatically. That habit protects both humility and confidence at the same time, allowing you to improve without becoming emotionally dependent upon outside validation. This kind of confidence is often misunderstood because it does not seek attention. It does not announce itself through louder words or dramatic displays of certainty. Instead, it appears through consistency. A person who remains respectful under pressure earns trust without demanding it. Someone who can disagree without becoming hostile demonstrates strength without needing to advertise it. These qualities rarely produce immediate admiration, yet they leave a lasting impression because they reveal stability instead of performance. Over time, people begin noticing that your reactions are no longer dictated by the emotional climate around you. They recognize a steadiness that cannot be easily shaken. Ironically, the less desperate you become to defend yourself, the more naturally your confidence becomes visible to everyone around you. This happens because genuine confidence is difficult to imitate. It is reflected in relaxed conversations, thoughtful pauses, and the willingness to let silence exist without rushing to fill it. There is no urgency to convince everyone. There is no constant search for approval hidden beneath every sentence. The need to perform gradually fades because your attention shifts from protecting an image to protecting your principles. That subtle change transforms not only how other people experience you, but also how you experience yourself. As your perspective continues changing, conflict itself begins looking different. Instead of viewing disagreements as personal battles, you start seeing them as opportunities to practice clarity, patience, and restraint. Some situations still require firm boundaries. Others require honest conversations that cannot be avoided. Yet even those moments feel different because they are no longer driven by wounded pride. They are guided by intention. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." You speak because something meaningful needs to be expressed, not because your emotions demand immediate release. That distinction makes every conversation more purposeful and far less exhausting. Gradually, your attention moves away from asking whether someone respects you and toward asking whether your own actions deserve respect. This inward standard creates remarkable freedom because it cannot be manipulated as easily by changing circumstances.